Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to put on spotlight the two gentlemen of the day, of the night, from wherever you're joining in. Professor Sheth, I hand over the stage to you. Ronnie, I hand over the stage to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, Ronnie, it is my privilege and pleasure to ask you questions and learn more about you. It's a great journey, first of all. I tell you, if there is any one role model above and beyond a successful entrepreneur, is a serial entrepreneur, and even more so, having also the urge to serve back the society, being a great philanthropist at the same time. So first question I have is very simple. We know each other, we have met before, is that when do you think you thought about becoming an entrepreneur? At what age that thought came in your mind?
It's almost impossible to get into a recollection, but I think when I was at a crossroad where I needed to go ahead and take my chartered accountancy exam with my father, it was a crossroad. It was either I was going to take that flight to the United Kingdom to start my new journey, or it was that I was going to be an entrepreneur.
Wow.
And I think that was, I don't know, maybe that was the age of 18, 19, 20, in that range. That was the crossroad, I think. And I think two things happened. I think my parents gave me an option. They said, okay, fine. If you want to be an entrepreneur, why don't you finish your chartered accountancy or finish your management? And then why don't you take on being an entrepreneur? And I think that's really the crossroad most of us face, right? Because to me, it meant like, wow, that would give me a plan B on day one, because that would mean that, okay, now I'm comfortable. That means I can always go back to a job. It was their way to tell me, if you don't succeed, because it's more likely you're not going to succeed, you can always go back to a job. And I think the tough decision for me was to close that door and only focus on planning.
So follow-up question, of course, Ronnie, have you any regrets of not being a chartered accountant, practicing and becoming a tax commissioner or something like that?
Can't say I have any regrets on not taking on my chartered accountancy. Sometimes I do feel higher education helps. And I think today what I'm doing with Upgrad is a full circle of life, because from that perspective, you know, now anyone at any age can go back and start with lifelong learning. So in some form or the other, that's not something that I visioned at that time, but that's what's happened now.
Interesting. Related, by the way, I'm also a chartered accountant without the degree. My major was income tax, and I came to US to do my MBA in production management, and I got turned on by psychology. So I became a behavioral science person, came into marketing, understanding psychology of customers. So everything is accidental in my case, but your journey is more fascinating because one more thing, you started with a toothbrush company, which is one thing. Then you are into cable television. I don't think there is any correlation in terms of raw material supply chain or anything. And then you went into Upgrad now, which is a great, by the way, success in many ways so far. It's so nice to see from an emerging economy as a platform, we're able to serve the world in a way, in terms of numbers and everything, it looks so good. What makes you different? You are a serial entrepreneur relative to most entrepreneurs who succeed once, but they don't necessarily succeed again and again. Many of the young people are aspiring to be entrepreneurs. What is the rationale behind serial entrepreneurship?
So Professor said, I'd like to say two things here. First, I think you used the word in the beginning, accidental. And you know, some things happen accidental. I believe in serendipity. I think if you put yourself in multiple places at various times and work very hard for that, you'll be at more right places at the right time. And I think a lot of us look at that as luck, but I think it's hard work before the luck happens. It's a lot of hard work before the luck happens. So it's about being in multiple places at the multiple times for you to be in the right place, right time. So I'm a very strong believer in serendipity in what we want to kind of do. I think the second one I would say here is, you know, serial entrepreneur has a little bit of a mixed definition, right? I mean, because the origin, I think, came from serial killer, I guess, right? So actually it would mean it would mean that it's all premeditated. And I would say to anyone who's looking at being a serial entrepreneur, there's no such thing, because that just sounds like you're a premeditated entrepreneur who's going to drop things and move on. So I think that is not, that's pretty much the definition that I don't live with. I think serendipity leads you through various situations. The businesses that I started, I think my entire first innings was very, very deeply into media, various forms, cable TV to UTV. I think the toothbrush was the only, what I would call into inverted commas, opportunistic exception, really. And I think, therefore, you can't plan success, you can't plan failure, and you can't plan the entire process. And serial just gives a sense of expectation to people that, okay, I can do this for 4 years, 6 years, and I can get out of this and start something new. And I think you can't plan failures and you can't plan exits. That's my strong experience.
Wow, very interestingly. In many ways, therefore, being at the right time, at the right place, but having the sense of destiny that you control your own future in many ways, rather than saying, let the world come to you, you have to grab the opportunity, as you have said in your writings also. I did want to ask a related question. I'm sure in your life, you had major ups and downs. What was the best upswing that you saw where you felt just so good? And what was it that was really down that you felt like, why the world is so hostile on me?
You know, I think I came from a lower middle class background. And when I became an entrepreneur, I think the first 2 years you get kicked around a lot. Right now, I think entrepreneurship is a lot with a lot of people where you start with a sense of entitlement in many ways, because you feel, A, I need to get funded, B, X, C, Y. There's always, I don't think at the time at which I started, the ecosystem was respectful of entrepreneurship. It was more like, oh, so you couldn't get yourself a job, so now you have to go work for yourself. That was one aspect. The second one, there was no environment of private equity, angel, venture capital. So it kind of strengthens you in ways that actually see you through life in very many ways. Second, I would say is, I mean, my ratio really is one where I think I may have failed 8 times and succeeded twice. And I think the important part is to see how that ratio works out well for you. And actually, it's a mathematical formula which I've sort of evolved over a period of time, right? Because I guess when you fail at that particular point in time, that's a 1x write-off or a 1x loss. But you got to really work on your successes being multiple X's. So even if I fail 8 times, it's an 8x minus. But if those 2 times I succeed at 20x, then it's 40 minus 8, which is 32. Right. And I think that's the law of averages that you do in various aspects. It could be in one company, it could be in a business, it could be in a lifetime, it could be in whichever way you want to pursue it. So that's really, I think, a little bit of how I've lived through the ups and downs. But I think my biggest failure is yet to come.
Why do you expect failure? What's the reason? Is there something you're looking forward to? Or do you think it's just the laws of averages or probability, or what's it? What do you think?
I think I've stopped learning, right? I mean, we'll all stop learning if we don't anticipate that. I really don't think we'll stop learning, because actually, if I don't anticipate that, then as an entrepreneur, I think your job is to overreact in many ways. You've got to be in a certain sense of momentum where you need to feel, that it's not a self-created crisis, but you need to be at that level. So I think when you anticipate things that can still, then you don't take anything for granted. Genuinely, you don't. So when I say it is yet to come, it is because that means I'm taking more risks than I used to. That means I am applying non-linear thinking. That means the past is not as relevant as the future is. And I can't rely constantly on my precedents.
Very excellent. Well, this is so insightful comment. I think many of the youngsters around here, or young people, can learn quite a lot, or we can learn also. I found one very interesting saying that when the student is ready, the teacher will show up. That's interesting. So unless you have the drive to constantly monitor the environment, people around you, they're more like a listening skill behind the scenes, even though overtly, it seems like then you are able to revitalize yourself and come out with something new, which is interesting. So I have a couple more questions. One has to do with you also started a foundation to educate, especially rural Indian population, millions, some people, which is a great scale and a score. How do you scale mentally? It seems like everything you do, you tend to think about scaling to a large level, to a level that usually people don't think about. You know, they think it's incremental. So your every business you have done so far, you have scaled it to a level, including the nonprofit now. How do you do? What comes to the mind? Is it just stretching yourself or something else?
Well, I think when you live in a country with 1.3 billion, you need to think about scale, right? Because if you're not solving problems at scale, then what are you doing, right? I mean, at a population of 1.3 billion, if you're impacting 5,000 lives, it's still phenomenal. But so I think that impetus comes from that background where you're seeing that. So I think I grew up in a market that was price sensitive, but I knew that what if you can scale those businesses, then you can really get to somewhere. So I think that's just has been my entrepreneurship approach to everything. And I think when we looked at even the foundation, and both my wife looked at that and looked at how to scale that up, it was really about solving a problem at scale. Now, the model that we chose, which is not just education, was a holistic model. So therefore, we needed a large enough concentric geography. Two things would happen then. If you want to bring permanent change into the not-for-profit space and create and measure impact, you need a larger geography. And the second one that I think we were also obsessed about was that we wanted to create a model that others could possibly follow in the future and that we could document. And if you do that with one village, one hamlet, 10 villages, it's a neat thing. It's a story, but it's not a model. So how do you create a model? I think would need that kind of element of scale.
Right. Well, this is brilliant. Excellent. Unrelated question now, totally. Most successful entrepreneurs are college dropouts.
What are college dropouts? Yeah.
College, and many of them would not have done high school unless it was necessary, you know, to graduate. They would have dropped out long ago. And I find the best entrepreneurs are not Bill Gates and all the typical names that we talk about, but musicians. Beatles were great entrepreneurs. You know, any one of the successful musician is a great entrepreneur also. Why do you think I tend not to like education, formal education? Any reason do you think? I know you did your degree, clearly, but it's not the same thing. What do you think?
I think, Professor, I would put it down to one word. It's called restlessness. I think depends on when the restlessness starts as an entrepreneur. And if it starts at an early age, when you feel restless about the education system and it's not giving you back what you really want at that stage, that's when you get restless. When you get restless, you don't evaluate. So I don't think it's a negative to education. It's a positive to restlessness at that particular point in time. That's how I would view it.
Well, that's great. You know, something related to that one in terms of entrepreneurial success, what you have done so very, very well. And I'm sorry, I'm not having my ear pod because it's running low.
Don't worry, that's fine.
You know, Peter Drucker was one of the best management thinkers of last century. And he always said there are only really two value creating functions in a company. One is innovation, something new, different you do, either invention or innovation. And the other one is marketing, so including branding. You seem to have done very well both, but most inventors tend not to invest in branding and marketing as much. Any advice on that as to balancing the two? Where should you put your money and how do you manage both? Because some of the teams are sort of having those struggles for the questions.
So, I mean, I'd say two things here. And I think the important part that is missing in today's 21st century companies, startups, or even large companies is culture. And I think culture actually drives a lot. And I think we don't spend the kind of level of attention we need to in culture. You can really hire a very good and excellent team at various levels in your company when you're 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, co-founders. But if you haven't set the culture, you'll only get a 1x output from a good team. But if you really have phenomenal culture, I think you can get to a 3x, 4x output with that same team. And the ROI of culture to a brand, to a team, I think is something that is maybe not what Peter Drucker said, but to me, that's a very, very important phenomenon of propelling organizations forward. That's just, I want to leave that as a separate thought. To your specific question, I would say, see, brands are built over a period of time. I think a lot of people of us, and especially people who raise a lot of money, they're saying, you know, so what are you going to spend the $100 million or $5 million that you raised on? I'm going to build, oh, I'm going to spend it on brand building. So what does that mean? Because the brand is only going to build, but you have a great product, and then you have great customers, and then those customers keep coming back to you for more and more, and you can sell them other things. That's when a brand is built, when the word of mouth is there, not because you spent $20 million on creating, into inverted commas, an awareness campaign. So I think many people mix up marketing with awareness, with actual brand building. And I think it's a period of time that it takes for you to do that. And therefore, to me, the word culture in this whole concept of innovation, brand, and culture, because actually innovation only happens with that sense of whether you have an organization that's got that. And brand will only happen if you stand for something. Sometimes the brand, as you know today, when you've got Tesla and Elon, for example, you don't need to have a brand building exercise, right? Because the person is talking out about innovation. Of course, he'll do a lot more things in hula and hoopla, but by and large, it's what you go with. So sometimes founders represent brands, sometimes a product represents brands. If you look at Disney, has different. It took 20, 30 years for it to really build that brand of consistency. So I think that's built over time. And for young entrepreneurs, I think money is not going to build a brand.
Interesting. Good point. Very good. Last question, and we'll come to you, upgrade for a moment. What would you say? Well, two things actually. One is that, you know, entry into a business seems to be not that difficult. Exit is very difficult. Any advice on exiting the businesses? I've experienced myself in my businesses when I was ready to quit or sell or do something. I had a hard time doing it. It's always longer than you think. Somehow it doesn't seem to happen. Everybody takes a stakeholding. Don't sell the business. What will happen to this stakeholder or that stakeholder? Any advice about planning exit?
So I'm not a very big evangelizer of exit. And I want to tell everyone that there's an entry and then there's an exit. But in between, it's called stick it out. And you may need to stick it out for 3 years, or you may need to stick it out for 30. And if you start the starting point, put a timetable of how long you want to stick it out, chances are you're not going to have an exit at all, or you will have a very poor exit. So that's just what I want to say, that actually the most important part is between entry and exit. There's a major period of sticking it out, of rough, and you cannot time that. Right. I also believe that if you really want to think about exit, I mean, my personal experience has been, if I make the call that I want to exit and I'm going to call a prospective investor or strategic, I'm going to get 1/3 the value. Wow. If I really want to exit, then I've got to create an aura where the call comes from the other side, because that's the beginning of really unlocking value.
Absolutely right. Very excellent, excellent. Last question, and we'll come to upgrade in a moment, but 4 or 5 minutes. And that is that we don't see, even including in this time, all the finalists or semi-finalists that have come, enough women entrepreneurs. There still seems to be sort of not, I mean, women are as good or better entrepreneurs as Muhammad Yunus has shown in Bangladesh, for example, in the lower socioeconomic classes, as we see all over the world, especially. Why still in the traditional way we think about entrepreneurs, women are not in leading the charge? What do you think?
You know, I mean, firstly, I don't agree in that context, because I do believe that you see a lot of them. I think the media plays its own role from that perspective. There is, for a lot of people who look at entrepreneurship, there could be different cycles for a woman entrepreneur taking that forward. I think there are many organizations where actually co-founders, our team have got women, and therefore actually they manage very well. And I would say to a lot of people who are women entrepreneurs, if you feel over a period of time, this is something where, and take a co-founder, match that out. And it doesn't mean take a male co-founder. I'm saying sometimes just having 3 women co-founders actually can create an entire ecosystem that allows everyone to feel, okay, this is going to be a good transition period from everywhere there. So I think, and there are many constituents that drive this, right? I mean, the venture capital and private equity community also would need to take supportive calls. I just don't think we need to single it out where it's almost like, oh, we need this quota of something. I don't think we need a gender equalization because we really don't need to put a category for that. We all know that actually intuitively and instinctively, women will obviously make better entrepreneurs. They're better, more people management. They have more instinctive skills than all of us men do from that point of view. And a lot of your decision and business decision is based on evolved gut. So any day I'd take a woman entrepreneur to someone who's a male entrepreneur. And I don't think we should have any category or a lollipop approach to it.
Okay, no, thank you so much. I'm with you all the time on that one. Personally, I believe the same way. And the last thing, of course, is upgrade, which is my passion also. You see the change from brick and mortar to more and more online. I think you are likely to become one of the major global online universities in the world across geographies. It has had a good success so far for whatever reason you have done that, including the formula of bringing top universities and their education, a certificate or a degree to your platform, essentially, by and large. Your plans about North America, what are you thinking about here? What's your game plan? I know Africa is waiting for you out there. I know that. I'm very passionate about us going into Africa for upgrade. But what about North America?
I think the last 1.5 years has put online education center stage in terms of evangelism. But I worry about only one thing, because online education is deep learning in many ways. And I think for a lot of us in the last 1.5 years, we've all come to the conclusion that actually online learning is just a camera and a live lecture, which is not. That's content consumption. And I think just now it's a temporary patchwork. So my only concern here would be, when we started up Upgrad, I think the biggest investments we made at that early stage was the tech platform that allowed you to have the interactivity where you can actually break out into classrooms, where you can actually feel that you are in a group with people. The most important first task we had for Upgrad was to remove anonymity from online learning, because for a lot of people, online learning is, okay, it's a lonely experience. I'm going to sit there, I'm going to put the kids to bed, and then I'm going to start at 11 p.m. in the night. It's not that. It's about, if I don't press enter tomorrow, I'm a dropout. It's not that. So from day one, how do you remove anonymity? And I think we spent the first 3 years building Upgrad with learning experience, high touch feel for digital, and the entire tech platform. So I think where we are today, given the entire change in the overall global environment and the evangelism that takes place, I think everyone's in a phenomenal place, because first, everyone looks at education as an event, in school, and then it's college and maybe a master's program, but it's no longer an event, I think. So for us, the biggest practice is obviously lifelong learning. And for a lot of people, lifelong learning is a strange phenomenon, because it's like, one of our ad commercials we just did into what I would call the brand building for us was really where, it goes to the boss and asks for an increment. And he says, well, why, what's the thing? He says, well, I'm doing my MBA. He says, well, how can you be doing your MBA? You're still here working. He says, no, I'm doing it online now, and that's the interactivity. That's the ability. There are people in many countries that have started working because of socioeconomic reasons at a very early age. And now they can go out and do their undergrad or their postgrad. So the liberation that online is going to give to masters, to degrees, to deep learning, to short learning, I think we're just about starting right now.
Yes. No, I agree with you.
Sorry, and just to finish that up. But so to us, obviously, India is a very large market, and therefore we're happy that we're originating there. But obviously, the other two large markets is China, which is substantially insulated in this form, and obviously the United States, just in terms of the university tie-ups and the credibility and the competitiveness with which everyone in the US works for that. So I think the partnerships are great. And I think for a lot of American universities, they've always looked at students coming across. And I think borders and immigration rules and everything is also going to change. So the ability to be able to do that online with the best brands in the world, So our job is to come into the US and work that work, but also show to the US and the universities there how we can do phenomenally well for them in Asia.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, as I mentioned, Africa may be waiting. Again, the affordability, accessibility, Africa is becoming a large market. And we may have to separate payer from a user in some fashion. Somebody else can pay. There's a lot of interest in African development in Africa, you know, as the next continent to rise, as China, India has risen, emerging markets in general. Brazil is a big market, as you know. The other one is fantastic. But the changing in the regulation about private universities, which are remotely located out in the jungles of Brazil, where factories or managers are out there. And there are universities that offer like 32, 33 locations physical, and they fly. Now one can do with more.
Yeah. But, you know, Professor, even in the US, I think the whole ROI concept on the return of investment on online degrees and learning is going to be definitely much, much better. I think you'll see a declining national debt on student loans over a period of time if you can actually now mix match, because the whole cost equation is going to be very different. It's universities is a much more selective process, and I think online is a much more eliminative process. And I think that's going to bring that tectonic shift.
Yes. No, I totally agree. We can go on forever, okay, but unfortunately, I think there are teams waiting to be judged by judges.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, we drag them out of all the places from all the 4 rooms and the code names that I already kind of know by heart now, between hotel and between Atlanta and Texas and Coimbatore and Hyderabad. So yeah.
Nice to see you again, and we have a standing invitation. When post-COVID era, you have to come to Atlanta.
Of course. Yes, of course. I think anyway, from whatever you described at the preliminary stage, it looks like our upgrad headquarters better be in Atlanta now, because everyone's headquartering something or the other in Atlanta. So
a great Western Hemisphere headquarters. You don't have to have a North American, South American. From Atlanta, you can manage the whole Western Hemisphere, which is a large market and a strong north to south dimension. So nice to see you again.
Lovely, lovely. And thank you for a lovely, engaging conversation.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. It's a pleasure. Virtually, may I request everyone to give a loud round of applause to these 2 great gentlemen. It's been a pleasure listening to you, and we are honored, gentlemen, for the words of wisdom that you have given. And I'm sure a lot of these entrepreneurs who are listening to you today, after 10, 15 years, will come back to the same TiE University as a keynote speaker, just like you, inspired by what you said today. Thank you so much from the bottom of our heart.
Thank you.